advance in AI, in modern AI. I mean, we have a lot of people from the math background, so I think it's old news that these reasoning models recently won the gold medals in, the International Math Olympiad. I think last year the model still failed to solve 1 out of the 6 problems, but in this defense, there's only 5 or maybe 6 humans that could solve it. And I'm pretty sure that very soon you will see these models acing the IMO. At the same time, these models are contributing to a lot of frontier math frontier math research. I think you can see new papers from Google DeepMind as well as from mathematicians, where they claim that some of these large language models, specifically reasoning models, Gemini, these models have already assisted them in, discovering new mathematics or proving existing conjectures, or sometimes finding solutions to some open like that. So the model and the problem with reasoning model is that they are very expensive. Currently, the model that if you use ChatGPT Pro or Gemini, that's what a language model is. It is an expert predictor, and it does so by receiving a sequence of text and producing a probability distribution. So, but then why? Okay, if a language model is only a word predictor, why is only an expert predictor? Why is it so powerful? So it is powerful because if the distribution that these language models can model is rich and correct, then the language models allow for a process called autoregressive generations. And the idea is just that you repeat the process that I described in the previous slide. You do that for as long as it takes. So, okay, autoregressive means the following. So you take this sequence, same examples, you have the distribution, you sample from it, then you have one more word. You add that one more word towards the end of the existing sequence that you have. Now you have a new sequence, and then you repeat the process by fitting the new sequence into your language model. And because your language model is a next predictor, it's going to produce the distribution over the next word, and you can repeat this process until infinity, like basically forever. So one thing that I want to note about in this slide is as you can see that predicting the first name of the president of the USA is pretty easy, but it should be a lot harder than predicting the last name of the president once you have already known the first name. In this case, right, predicting the first name is Donald, you should have a relatively high probability already. But once you know that the first word is Donald, then the conditioning of that knowledge, then the next word that you should predict is definitely Trump. But the probability of that should be essentially 1. But it's for some technical reasons you cannot have probability 1 in a language models. Anyhow, so provided that a language model always produces the correct or the nearly correct distribution, you can perform autoregressive generation to literally generate any sequence of text that you want. In fact, it is this mechanism that ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, anything like that, uses to generate the answers to your questions when you go to those to their website, or to generate code to complete your programs and so on. It's all next word prediction, and this is a very, very powerful paradigm. So reasoning models, again, as I said in the beginning, they are not too much more special than that. So for now, I'm going to explain how do we turn a normal language models into a reasoning models. So the input sequence so the input sequence that we give into a language models in the language model terminologies, we usually call them a prompt. So in this case, let's consider this prompt. This prompt is a statement of a problem. It is a very simple inequality. If you are here, like, chances are that you already know how to prove this inequality. So if a language model receives this prompt, usually chances are that because the model has seen this prompt somewhere in its training data, so the model is going to be able to predict to produce the probability distribution of the next word in particular. So if it stops at 2ab dot, then the model can say, will predict the next words is we, and then you sample again from that alter regressively, you have half, and then so on. You repeat until you have this entire sequence that represents the proof of the model. So that is what a normal language model would do. Okay, so we call this I call this a non-reasoning model to distinguish with what I'm going to talk about next. So what does a reasoning model do different from that? So what happens in a reasoning model is that when, as a user, you give us a prompt, then the operator of a reasoning model, in this case, if you put these questions into ChatGPT, then OpenAI, as the operator of the model, they are going to take your prompt and they are going to append one more word into your prompt. It's not really a word. Again, in the language model terminologies, we call this a token. The token is going to look something like the word think here, and the word think has a very special meaning to a language model. It is a signal to tell the model that, hey, do not simply generate the answer as if you, as a normal non-reasoning model would do. Instead, when the model receives the word think, it's going to generate a completely different sequence of text. In this case, this is a sequence of text that I made up. But this sequence represents the thinking process that a human would go through when they see this problem. So for a simple problem like this, you are not going to see a very interesting thinking trait. By the way, we call this a thinking trait. But for very hard problems such as IMO level problems, you are going to see very, very long thinking traits, like tens of thousands of words with many interesting insights that the model comes up with. And after a long time of generating these thinking traits, the model is going to receive another signal. Okay, the first signal that it receives is the token think, right? Now, after thinking for a while, the model will receive the second signal. It is called answer. And this is the signal for the model to stop the thinking process and start generating the answer. In this case, again, this is a very simple problem. So chances are that the model will finish thinking before you tell it to by giving it the answer token. And when the model sees the answer token, or when it thinks that it has finished thinking, it's going to generate the normal answer. That's it. It's the same auto-regressive process as a normal language model, but the only new thing that we have in this case is the presence of the two tokens, think, which starts the thinking trait, and answers, which stop the thinking trait. That's all. That's all about reasoning models. So I'm going to pause here a little bit, and I want to ask if anyone has any questions regarding the thinking model. So far, I only explained the process. I did not explain why the model would do that, or how can we force the model to do this kind of thinking. Any questions?
In the U.S. president question, model update its knowledge, right? Because if it's still use data from 2023, then it would not know that Donald Trump would be the president. So
yeah, the model does update the knowledge, and it does so by performing an online search. It will perform an online search before answering this kind of questions. So usually all of the models today will do some very small amount of thinking. Not always, but it always does. And the thinking process will tell the model that this is the question that needs up-to-date knowledge. Therefore, please go online and do a search online, and then take the answer, answer accordingly.
Right. Here, so there's another questions about when
Okay.
training models for reasoning, do we need to add a reasoning paragraph as the data text between think and answer tokens?
Yes, we do, and I'm going to talk about that right now. Okay. So again, yeah, this is these are the content that I talked about in the previous slides. I'm sorry, I forgot to click next here. So again, yeah, the part, the tokens between think and answer are called the thinking trait. Usually, the thinking trait is considered proprietary knowledge for the companies that operate the model. So usually, you don't see them. And yeah, so usually you don't see them, but they are being generated behind the scene. Okay. Next. So how do I guess I'm going to talk about how do we train these models. But before we get there, I want to give a justification of okay, why do we want these reasoning models? So the reason, the examples that I gave you previously, it is a very simple example. So chances are that you don't even have to do a lot of thinking in order to answer it. However, for very hard questions like IMO level problems, these are the questions that will really benefit from from the model generating the thinking trait before answering. If you try to make an analogy between these models and the humans, then it's just that if you have a very hard problem, chances are that it doesn't matter how smart you are, it's still very hard for you to immediately answer or solve the problem without doing some thinking. But from the language models perspective, from the probabilities perspective, because I mentioned language models are probability distribution generator. So what we have, so the hope for reasoning models is that if you want the model to generate a correct answer, essentially you are sampling this answer autoregressively from an ever-growing probability distribution. So the hope is that for reasoning models, the probability that you generate the correct answer conditioning on the prompt and the thinking trait should be a lot higher than the probability of the correct answer given only the prompt. So in fact, for some very hard problems like IMO level problems or I don't know ERDAS problems, for example, usually the probability when you condition on the thinking trait, the probability of you getting the correct answer is like so much higher than otherwise. That is why we want the model to generate the thinking trait before generating the answer. And
Yes.
actually, yes.
And if let's slow down a little bit and ask the questions.
Okay.
What is a difficult question? Is there any functions? Is there any metric to evaluate whether this question is harder than the other questions?
I guess if you limit yourself to the context of a math competitions, if you look at the IMO problems, problem 1 and 4 are easy, whereas 3 and 6 are very difficult. So I guess in limited context like that, it's very easy to define difficulties. In the open world, is just a lot harder to define hard questions versus easy questions. Honestly, I don't have a very good definition. Perhaps, just perhaps, okay.
Is it the search?
Just
is it the search space for finding solution is much larger than the chance
not
of
necessary.
finding the right path in this may be so small, and just genius people can find it, or somehow.
I think it is not necessarily the case so the search space is probably related, but so here's an example. If you take chess for example. if you are in the middle games, right? If you don't play chess, and I'm sorry, this is a bad example for you, but if you do, then think about the two phases in a game: middle games and end games. In the middle games, you have many possibilities of moves, and whatever you do can lead to many different scenarios. On the other hand, in end games, whatever you do is going to your action space is a lot smaller because there are not too many more pieces left on the board. But if you go ask the grandmasters, ask the Russian, they are going to tell you that end games are a lot more difficult than video games. So I don't think search space, the size of the search space is necessarily a hard thing that defines a problem being hard or easy. And again, honestly, I don't have a very good answer for that.
Okay, let's move on.
All right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so yeah, so before the questions, I talked about, so I described the reason why we want reasoning models. It's because it induces a better probability for us of generating the answer. In fact, this is also the reason, this is also the way we train reasoning models. So in order to in order to make the model behave in the way such that if it sees a thinking trait, it's going to generate better answer. What can we do? Yeah, I think somebody has already asked that before. If you want to make the model think, then the only thing that you can do is to produce the model with example thinking, with data that shows the model to think. So what happens is the following. So the first, I guess, the first reasoning models are actually developed within OpenAI. This is in an effort that outside it is known as the strawberry effort. Yeah, OpenAI has really weird ways to name their projects. So strawberry is the internal name for reasoning models. And the main contribution of the strawberry project is that OpenAI hired a lot of people, mathematicians, physicists, I guess many scientists, also creative writers, economists, many people like that. And then they gave these people some problems, some prompts. Also, I think they also asked these people to contribute prompts as well. And then once they check, so prompts comes in the forms of problems. And then these scientists, I guess we should call them data providers because they also do many other things, not just science. But these data providers, upon providing their prompt, OpenAI also asks them to provide the answers to their prompt, to their questions. And more importantly, along with the answers, we also ask them to provide the thinking trait. Thinking traits is, I guess, thinking traits is a very diverse is a very diverse topic because different people will think differently. But we ask them to write down what they think. Some people will write down some text. Some people will actually, draft something on the paper and then took a photo of the paper. Yes, we take that too. And then we put those so-called thinking traits and the answer together. We mix them together to create a new data set to train the models. So this data set is going to look, every instance in this data set is going to look something like, here's the prompt, followed by the think tokens, followed by the thinking trait, followed by the answer token, followed by the answer. So again, the next part, I don't know why, but I do know that empirically, when a language model is trained on a lot of these examples like this, then in the future, when the model sees a prompt and the thinking token, it is going to behave similar to the way that these data providers behave when they have to think. And it's like the after being trained on this type of data, the think token started to hold an important signal to the model in such a way that if the model see that token, it will provide a thinking trait. Similarly, if the model is generating some text in this thinking trait, if it sees the answer token, it recognizes the answer token as the signal to stop the thinking trait and start generating the answer. That is all. I know it doesn't sound super interesting, but the way that modern AI works is very mechanistic. If you want to induce some behaviors, you collect some data. And by the way, we collected a lot of data like this. in the training process of Strawberry. And I want to reiterate that the main contribution of the Strawberry project of OpenAI is the empirical observation that if we collect a lot of data and then we train in the format that I just described, and we train the model on that data, then we can induce the thinking and answering behavior. And that is how reasoning models are created.
Yeah, Lam is asking like a more realistic
Yes.
question. Yeah. What is the size of the thinking training data set? Is it super small comparing to
I'm very sorry that this is very proprietary. I cannot tell you the data size, but I can tell you one other statistic that is, so I think this is kind of publicly known that training language models is very expensive. Like we have to pay a lot of money for the AI chips. But I can tell you that the price, the money that we spend on the reasoning data is actually more expensive than the price than what we pay for the chips. And what we pay for the chips is already on the orders of billions of dollars. So I tell you the money because some people are more expensive than others. So you know that, but I cannot tell you how many examples. And I want to make another note that once you have induced the original thinking and answering behavior in the models, you can take a model that can think and you can perform other algorithms on that. Specifically reinforcement learning and this knowledge distillation or reverse knowledge distillation. There are like many other algorithms like that you can use to amplify the thinking capability. However, to induce, that is to first teach the model to think, there is no other way rather than collecting a lot of data and then train the models on that. Okay, so that is how you train reasoning models. So yeah, okay, so once you have trained the models, then you use the models in the way that I have described earlier. So when you receive the prompt, you insert your thinking tokens, you let the model think for however long it wants to think, or if you think that the answer is already taking too long, then you manually insert the answer tokens and tell the model that hey, you are out of time, please answer. Usually, again, a well-trained model will just obey these commands, okay, that is how we train and use reasoning models. I think this is actually the end of the first part of the talk. I'm going to pause for questions because I guess for many people here, this is probably the more interesting part of the talk because the coming parts are more about, what happens inside the reasoning models. So yeah, please questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so a question from Guan. Since the
Yes.
thinking trait of the current LMs is usually extremely long, and I presume the data provider don't have that long thinking traits, will this affect the model's performance? As
No, it
how
doesn't.
it doesn't?
Yeah, it doesn't. You can, so as I mentioned, once you have already induced the original thinking behavior in the model, you can use reinforcement learning to encourage the model to think longer and longer throughout the process. This is like the first time you train on an Olympiad problems, you can solve some very easy problems, but once you can solve some easy problems, you can gradually push yourself to do harder and harder, longer and longer problems. It's the same process. Gradually improve. Okay. Hopefully that
So
answers your question.
when you say when you say training, it seems to imply that the model have some sort of memory, or so you force it to adopt some kind of thinking, some kind of some kind of pattern recognition that's similar to the human provider. Is that what you mean by training?
Yes. So again, language models are probability distribution generator. So training a language model means to minimize the model's entropy on the thinking on the text data on the data that has a thinking trait. So if the model has smaller entropies on that, then it's more likely that the model will generate a thinking trait. That's what I meant by training. And how do you minimize that entropy? Models have parameters. It is an optimization problem. You do gradient descent to minimize a number.
And
Right,
how do
you are
you
talking about reasoning models, so it seems that is if I understand correctly, you know, it's a bit different from the language model. Is that, or is it
No,
still the same?
there's no difference. Thinking, reasoning models.
Still the same. Okay.
Yes. Again, yeah, I'm sorry that this may not sound very interesting, but reasoning models are also just language models, just on a different type of sequences.
Okay.
And then you still train by gradient descent, forward, backward. Very boring stories, but modern AI is like that. It's very, very mechanistic, simple and scale. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and one more question.
Please.
How do you introduce reinforcement learning into the training process?
You will find some new problems that your data providers haven't provided you, and then you ask the model to solve those problems, and then you also ask the model itself to read its own solution and predict the solution. And then you ask the model to provide a score, and you use this score as a signal to train reinforcement learning.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Let's move on.
Yes.
Let's move on. There are a lot of things more.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that is so I'm going to, so this is a separation between two parts in this talk. The part that I talked about before is reasoning models and what are you doing there. So that part, as in my word, we call that the what. The what, okay? The what means that what kind of computations are you computing? Here is a model. Language, everything is a language models, and they are next words predictors. So what kind of next word are you trying to predict, and how are you making that prediction better? So that is the what part, okay? From now on, I'm assuming that the what is already solved, meaning that somebody has trained a very good reasoning models. And the next part focuses on how do you perform the kind of computations that are required to do whatever that we have talked about before. Okay, so the what we talked about, now we talk about the how, and then in understanding the how, we will also understand why is it slow, and then how to speed it up. So okay, let's start with the how. So again, how do you use the reasoning models? You give it a prompt, you tell it to think, and then the model is going to think until you answer. And the problem with this models is it is exactly that process, because generating the thinking traits, generating words or tokens is a very expensive process. And again, because this is an auto-regressive process, so you have to repeat a lot. And in this process, in this loop, you keep repeating auto-regressively generating. Not only that you have to repeat a lot of things, but you also have to repeat a lot of work that are wasted. And I'm going to explain what are you repeating that is so wasteful. But overall, the TLDR is that this is expensive because you have to do a lot of useless things. And unfortunately, so far, there is no other way to not do some of them. Okay, that's why they are expensive and slow. Okay, so again, auto-regressive means generating the next word, and then you use it and then you use appending the word to your sequence and continue. Now, let's look a little bit deeper into the type of computations that happen so that inside a language model that turns a sequence of text into a probability distribution. So when a model receives a sequence of text, every language model maintains a dictionary, and this dictionary maps every word in all languages in the world. So that this dictionary is very big. Okay, every word, every language in the world, every word there has an entry in this dictionary. Okay, but the dictionary maps every word into a vector. Okay, word into vectors. Vectors here is usually high dimensional. I'm using the letter D here to represent the dimension. Usually this number D is somewhere 8,000 or 11,000, maybe 12,000, depending on the model size. Okay, but all the words that
what is the realistic vocabulary size?
I guess 300,000. 300,000. Yeah. So if you count all the languages in the world, including Chinese, Japanese, also Arabians, Farsi, and so on, there are not that many words. Overall, there are about 300,000 words. Okay, so yes, okay, so the words are mapped into vectors. And then, okay, if words map into vectors, then sequence of sets of words map into a matrix, right? And after, so this step of mapping the words into the vectors is usually called word embeddings. And then once the words have been mapped into vectors, you perform a lot of computations on these vectors. But in a language model, in a modern language models, there are only two types of computations. They are called attention and fully connectedness, a very long word. I'm going to say FFN from now on. And a language model is going to, map words into vectors and then just repeat doing attention, FFN, and then attention, and then FFN in the interleaving fashion until the end. It repeats many times. The number of times that this is repeated depends on the models. I'm going to tell you that OpenAI ChatGPT does this from a lot from more than 50 times, but I'm not going to say how many, just many times. Okay, towards the after you have finished these repetitions, you will project again. Remember, your input are matrices, and these functions like attention and FFN, they change the values in your matrix, but they do not change the shape of the matrix. So in the end, you can take this matrix out, and then you can once again project the matrix into the space whose dimension is equal to your vocabulary size. And then you can, so in the end, you have these scalars, and then you apply a function on these scalars. We call that the softmax function. The softmax function will turn these scalars into a valid probability distributions, and that is the distribution that a language model will produce. Okay, I hope this is clear. But that is how a language model performs its computation to go from the sequence of words to a probability distribution. So now we are going to zoom in to one of those two computations. Remember, I mentioned there are two types of computation, attention and FFN. I'm going to zoom into FFN. I'm going to tell you what exactly are the computations that happens in an FFN. And in seeing so, I will also explain why they are expensive. All right, so let's dive into FFN. What is FFN? So remember, D-dimensional. D is a tensor. D is an integer. So usually, in modern language model, we define another constant called h. Usually 4D. Sometimes we do HD, but let's say 4D, just any constant. So an FFN layer act on one row of the matrix of the word matrix that I mentioned. Remember, every word becomes one vector. Sequence of words becomes a matrix. So FFN act independently on the rows of this matrix. So each row of this matrix is what? 1 by D. What FFN does is that every FFN layer has two parameters, W1 and W2. The dimensions of these are D times H and H times D. And these are the dimensions that are chosen so that matrix multiplication makes sense. Or well defined. So 1D, you right multiply by W1DH. So you have 1 by H. And then you apply a function, a function f. It can be any function, but it is an element-wise operations. Usually what we do is that we replace every values by the maximum value of itself and 0. So basically every negative number becomes 0. Okay, so it also doesn't change the shape of x times W1. And then it's still 1 by h, so you can multiply it by W2, which is h by d. So and then this is the figure that describes this process. So in the end, after you do W1 and then add W2, you have the new row, new vector of the same shape, so same size with y. And then you do that to all the rows in the input matrix, then you have the same shape, which is also one of the things that I mentioned. That's it. That is all the computations that happens in one FFN layer. Okay, very simple. Very simple. Again, simplicity is probably the word that I say a lot in this talk. That is because modern AI really focuses and stresses on simplicity. Okay, so this process, as I warned you, this is extremely slow. Okay, why is it so slow? It should be simple, right? But why is it slow? So let's see why is it slow. So the first thing that I want to remind you is that I have mentioned that D is a big number. D is usually in this, the 12K is a reasonable number. This number is just 12 times 1024. It looks less scary, but it doesn't have anything special. Usually 12K. All right. And remember, H is 4D, right? In the previous slide. So if D is this number and then H is 40, then you can, the first thing that you can see is that the sizes of the matrices, W1 and W2, they are very big matrices. And at this point, I need to mention one more thing. That is the computations in a language model usually happens on a special device. It's an AI accelerating chip, and the accelerating chip that we use that is the most popular is called the GPU. So I'm going to describe the process how W1 and W2 as well as X and other things are used on the GPUs in order to perform an FFN calculations. Okay, so the whole process is going to look like this, but we are going to zoom in into each of them. But so I'm going to start with this part. So every GPU has a component which is a part of the chip. Is called HBM for high bandwidth memory. In some literature, people are going to call HBM DRAM. Yeah, there are reasons, but let's just say it's HBM or DRAM. In the beginning, on all of the GPUs, the vector X that we mentioned, input to FFN, as well as the two matrices, W1 and W2, all of them are going to live in DRAM. DRAM is big. The newest generation of GPUs from NVIDIA has 192 gigabytes of DRAM. It's pretty big. It's small enough to hold these matrices. So okay, so the problem is the GPUs again. So we are going to do matrix multiplications, right? I mentioned that we will be multiplying vectors and matrices. The GPUs has a special unit that can multiply matrices. Usually, it's called the tensor core. The problem is the tensor core do not operate on DRAM. The tensor cores can only operate on another part of the GPU memory called SRAM for shared RAM. I don't know. Yeah, there are reasons that it is called that way, but it's called SRAM. It's a different region of the memory of the GPU memory compared to DRAM. Okay, so if you want to do this computation, what do you have to do? You have to copy the data from DRAM into SRAM. Again, because the tensor cores hate DRAM, they only work on SRAM. So you have to copy. Copying is slow, extremely slow. That is, and this is the first copy that you have to mention, that you have to perform.
What is the bandwidth there?
Depending on the GPU type, 8 terabytes per second.
8 terabytes per second is slow.
Yeah, very slow. Yes, because remember, you have to do like 100 times of this per word. Auto-regressive. So every word you have to do this 100 times, and you need to do this for thousands and thousands of words. That is why Jensen Huang is so rich.
So there's some clarifying questions. So X is your kind of question vector, right? You turn the question into the vector, and then this W1 and W2 are this matrix you got from training, or you try to change it each time?
This is correct. W1 and W2 are the solution to the optimization problem that I solved during training. They are parameters.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. Now let's continue. You have to copy the W1 into the SRAM. I think you can already guess. Eventually, you will need to copy W2 into SRAM again because you have the second matrix multiplications. But it's not all. It's not all. Okay. On SRAM, you can perform the multiplications, but remember that you still have to perform the X. So you need to copy the matrix product X and W1 from SRAM into another region of the GPUs. And okay, this is kind of a lie because in different generation of the GPUs, you will have to copy this from SRAM to somewhere else. But let's just say in some older generation of GPUs, you will be copying these guys from SRAM back into DRAM. Okay,
Because?
and remember, because you cannot perform F on SRAM. SRAM is for matrix multiplications. It's very yeah. GPUs have many components, and the components are designed for very special purposes. So on the parts that you can multiply matrices, you can only multiply matrices. You cannot do F. But the modeling people requires that you do both. So you need to copy. In modern generation of GPUs, there are other things. There are another parts called TRAM, also RRAM. So there are many other things. But the point is that you have to copy. No, there's no other way around. Okay, so you have to copy the product the X by W1. And remember, this is big because why? Because the size of that is 1 by H, and H is even bigger than your D. Yeah, right. H is 4D or 8D. So you need to copy. That sucks. Okay. After you finish copying, good luck, haha. You need to copy it back to DRAM. And now you also have to copy W2 into SRAM, because SRAM is where matrix multiplications happens, and you have to do it again. Correct? Okay. So you have to do a lot of copies. It is the copies that sucks. Okay, copying really sucks. In fact, for the GPU manufacturers, everyone has already realizes that matrix multiplications is so fast that copying actually becomes a bottleneck. And now remember, okay, every time you want to generate one word, you have to repeat this process 100 times, 50 times, whatever, right? For W1 and W2. And you have to repeat this 100 times, many times more because of auto-regressiveness. That is why the whole process is so expensive. And I also mentioned wastefulness, right? Remember, I mentioned wastefulness. Because this is because all of the copying doesn't do anything. All of the copying of W1 and W2, they literally don't do anything, but they become the memory bottleneck. And in fact, there are many chip manufacturers, they are trying to make SRAM bigger so that SRAM can always hold the W1 and W2, and so they can avoid copying. But that is a topic for another day. Okay.
And what you are saying is applying for a single GPU. How is like hundreds of thousands GPU would orchestrate here?
Yeah, I'm getting to that next. This is about yes, this is about single GPUs. Huge matrices copying them sucks. Okay, so how do we make them less suck? Yeah, it is exactly the point that you have mentioned, Angson. You do that by doing multiple GPUs, by using multiple GPUs. How do you do that? I'm going to explain right now. Okay, okay. So again, to make things faster, you have to copy W1 and W2. Not that you have to, but the idea is that you perform this copy in parallel. How do you do that in parallel? You use multiple GPUs, and you let each of the GPUs copy only part of your W1 and W2. The equation for this thing is like very simple, and I'm showing this on the screen. If you have like if you are like a mathematician, you probably already know what is going on. But I'm going to walk you through an animation of this process in the next few slides. So if you don't want to deal with these notations and equations, it's okay. Okay. So here is an illustration of that equation. I keep on the notations, but okay. So for simplicity, let's say your D is 2, H is 4D, so H will be 8, right? 2 by 4 is 8. So W1 is what? W1 will be H times D, so this is 8 by 2. You do this multiplication, and then I'm color coding on these things. So what happens in matrix multiplication is that you take X, you multiply with the first row of W1, you have the first value in the middle, you do that with the second, and so on. I'm not patient enough to draw on the arrow, so let's assuming this. So, and then you apply F on this output. And then for W2, what you do is that you take this row, you multiply with the first row of W2 to produce the first element in your output, Y. So far so good. So far so good. I hope the animation makes the linear algebra clearer. Okay. So next to the next slide. I am not going to do anything. I'm just going to take my previous slides, but I'm moving the matrices out a little bit. So this is before, okay? This is after. So here I am showing the split that that I wrote in the equations. So W1 is going to be split into W11 and 12, W2 into W21 and 22, and I'm going to just take the squares and then pull them a little bit away from each other in the slide, right? All the math still apply. Now, what I want to tell you is that if you look into the second multiplication, it is literally the first half multiplied by the first half of the rows plus the second half multiplied by the second half of the row, right? So I'm going to take these halves that I just separate and I rearrange them into the following figure. So as you can see, this is a perfect division of work into two processes, and these processes are completely independent of each other, meaning that each process can perform its own computation without worrying about the other. But in the end, you have to pay for one thing, that is you need to sum up all of your results. This is just linear algebra. I hope it is clear. If it is not clear from the figure, it's also clear from the equations, hopefully. And
It's divide and conquer.
sorry.
It's doing
Sorry?
divides and conquers, right?
Yeah, it's exactly the divide and conquer. So far I have illustrated the process, which is called split K. There are many names for this. Some people call it split K. Some other people call this tensor parallelism. Fancier name, same thing. Yes, and this is the decomposition of the FFN process onto 2 GPUs. In reality, you can do this on 200 GPUs if you want to. Right. There's no reason there's nothing that prevents you from that. It's just that if you split more, then in the end you need to you need to add the results from multiple GPUs. But as you can see, adding this thing is about 1 times D. That is the shape of your output. So adding them is actually a lot cheaper than copying your W1 and W2. Oh, by the way, why is it faster? Because now each of your parallel GPU is only holding a smaller part of W1 and W2. So, and you are bounded by the bandwidth. Now you are separating this thing into multiple bandwidth. That is why you are faster. That is why you do pay some price in the end, because you need to add them together. It's nothing compared to the cost that you save by splitting the W's into multiple smaller parts. That's all. That's actually the gist, the spirit of split K or tensor parallelism. That and I don't think if I say this, I will be spilling any OpenAI secrets, because all AI company in the world, again, all of them, they are using this technique. If they are not using this technique, they are stupid. And they wouldn't become a frontier AI lab if they don't do this. But as you can see, this is a very simple technique. Yes, it requires some linear algebra, but extremely simple. Simplicity, again, I stress on this because modern AI are like that, very mechanistic, very simple and scalable. As I mentioned, theoretically, there's nothing that prevents you from doing this on 200 GPUs. Yeah, and this doubles the throughput. That is why you are better. Why you are faster. Yeah, of course, you can do this on more GPUs. That is it. That's it. That is the so far I told you what are reasoning models. I explained the computations that happen inside the reasoning models. I also explained why it is expensive. It is expensive because you have to copy the weight, and the weights are big, and the GPUs have limited bandwidth. And then I also presented the solution, called split K, on how to make it faster. Okay, as I promised, sorry, not promised, but I cautioned from the beginning, I wouldn't have time to get to the second optimizations. But the idea of the second optimizations is very it applies to attention, because remember we have FFN and attention. It is in the same spirit, but it tries to solve a different problems. So if the problem for FFN is that you need to copy the W1 and W2, then for attention, the problem is that you have to do too much computations. This time it's real computation, not just copy. But the idea is the same. You can also split attention into parallel branches, and you perform the parallel branches on multiple GPUs, and then there is also a way to combine them. How do you do that? It's just a lot more complicated. as I promised, I put this into another appendix of the slides to go through all of to show you that hey, I actually have them, and the slides will be available to you, so you can go through that and see it for yourself. Or if somebody is curious enough, I'm very happy to explain it. But again, same spirit, solve a different problem. That is now that is computational complexity rather than just way copy. So, but again, same spirit, solving a different problem, and to divide and conquer. That is how. So that's how you make attention fast. Okay, so that's all the contents that I plan to deliver. Now, okay. In summary, we learn what are reasoning models, what do they compute, how do they compute that, why is that process slow, and how to make it faster. Again, the emphasis is on simplicity, because that is what modern AI is all about. Okay, that's all. I'm very happy to take any questions, comments, complaints, whatever. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks so much, Hugh. So there are actually quite a lot of questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to answer. Yeah, you can take any of these questions, or I can go to the Q&A docs and then read and answer.
Yeah, so but I wanted to answer one question for myself. Many people here. How can students and researchers in Vietnam get involved in this process of revolutions in AI?
Oh, I guess there are many ways.
Without the Colossus, without the 200,000 GPUs building in 120 days.
I mean, there are also GPUs in Vietnam, not too many today, but I'm pretty sure that because GPUs are so centralized to AI, and I think the Vietnamese government, as well as many rich people in the country, for example, they have already realized the opportunities with AI. So they really want to develop AI sovereignty in Vietnam. As a result, in the next few years, chances are that you will see way more GPUs available in Vietnam, and this will help you to get exposed to modern AI research. That's one thing you can do. Another way is that if you go online, search for many cloud providers, and I'm going to type some of the name here. Uh, uh, um, mm, uh, uh, so there are many cloud providers, such as the names that I provided here. They actually provide a lot of free credit, free GPUs credit. So if you are, for example, if you are a university student and you have something like .edu emails, you can leverage that and then talk to these cloud providers, and they can give you, I guess, not too much, maybe $50 worth of GPU credit. Using them, if you use them effectively, you can already do a lot of research. At least you can help yourself to perform some computation so that you can understand. For example, if you want to implement the split K process I just described in my talk, I guarantee you it's not going to cost you more than 30 cents. $0.3 or something like that. It's very cheap. So yes, you won't be able to train ChatGPT with that. But if you want to learn, you can already learn quite a lot. And if you are clever, I think you can also devise something new. And then, as soon as you start to create something new, then there's already some learning that is already sparking in you. So, okay, why I mentioned all of these details, but what I wanted to say is that despite all of the scary numbers of money pouring into AI, the bar of entrance is not that terrible. Opportunities are there for the people who are, who are hardworking and clever, with resourceful with their things, I guess.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
Yeah.
The current models aren't thinking in users' language. Like we ask in Vietnamese, but they are thinking trace in English. Any way to get it to the Vietnamese thinking trace? And does the mess up of the two language affect the result?
The current models can only think effectively in English, because getting the thinking data in English is already hard. So what we will do is that when the model receives a question, there is a classifier that will rate how difficult is the question. and in this case, by difficulty, I meant does it require serious thinking? And if the classifier says that the problems that the prompts require serious thinking, then it will induce a step of translating the question from whatever language it is into English. And then the thinking happens in English because that is where the training data came in. And in the end, after you had answer, we add an extra thing that tells the model to translate the answer back into the original language. It's all done by some kind of prompting behind the scenes. But yeah, one thing to note is that most of the thinking traits are in English. It's because the most of the data is in English also.
All right. Here we actually spare 5 minutes over the time because this is so interesting
thank
a
you.
talk. And,
Yeah.
know, even
I think we can go on a little bit longer if
a little bit
I'm
longer.
happy. I'm happy to.
if you have time, because for example, I think the first talk lasts 1.5. The first chat lasts 1.5 hours. So I think there's a lot of interest in your talk. But I do have a couple of questions.
Let's go. Let's go.
My
I'm happy.
question is that
Thank you.
actually, because of the huge amount of investment, it seems like the system is now more rigid to change, right? So, for example, if someone come up with an idea of a new algorithm that, let's say, use more category or graph theory than linear algebra, then how flexible is the current infrastructure to such change?
Completely dead. It's completely dead. The current infra is too specialized into processing attention and FFN. So I guess if somebody, yes, there is actually a line of research called graph neural net, but it's almost dead because the computations there is cannot be implemented efficiently on a machine that is only good, that is becoming increasingly specialized to be good at attention and FFN. So it's unfortunate. And yes, I think it is a skill thing in this field. Very few people who are really contrarian, they are willing to get out of this loop and try something new. Most of them fail. Sometimes one of them will be very successful. So in the current paradigm, no, let's talk about the previous paradigm first. Before there was deep learning, there was no GPUs and most computation happens on the CPUs. There's only one contrarian guy, Jeffrey Hinton. He spent many years in the unknowns. Nobody knows what nobody knew what he was doing. Many people criticized him. He couldn't get his research funded, but he went through it. And eventually he made this thing. He won the Turing Award, the Nobel Prize, but he's already more than 80 years old. And for most of the years in his life, he suffered a lot. I would say not many people are ready for that. But today, there is one contrarian mind in language models. His name is Ilya Sutskever. He was one of the co-founder of OpenAI and a PhD student of Jeff Hinton. Because he is so famous, because he made OpenAI. So when he says that we need to come back to research, the field listens to him. And they actually funded him, I think $2 billion or so for him to invest in some new compute paradigm. But okay, if you are not Ilya and you come to the Silicon Valley and tell people that, hey, I think we should do quantum computing, chances are that they will say, oh, yo, good luck. I think that's how to, that's how, that's unfortunate.
Right. Any comparison between TPU and GPU?
Yes. So do you remember that for split K, one of the key things is that in the end of the split K process, you have to sum up the y's, right? The output of I can go back to that. Yeah, here. Summing up y equals y1 plus y2. So on the TPUs, that summation in the end is a lot faster. Okay, that summation in the end is a lot faster. So that is why on the TPUs, you can split this onto many more cores, many TPU cores. Each of the TPU cores loads the W1 and W2 slower than the GPUs, but the final summation is a lot faster. Does it make sense? Yeah. Trade off. Yeah. So on the GPUs, you cannot split too much because eventually you will be bottlenecked by the summation in the end. But each of your things is faster. On the other hand, each TPUs is weaker, but the summation in the end is a lot faster. So TPUs are like many weak things coming together smoothly, where GPUs are a few small strong guys, but it's harder to make them collaborate effectively. But interestingly, so these paradigms are converging. So Google is making each of their TPU stronger, and NVIDIA is making multiple GPUs connecting together more smoothly. So they are all converging. But that's basically the trade-off. Yeah.
So are there any kind of physical limit to this process? I mean, there's finite amount of CPU one can. I mean, right? I mean, what can you make let's say double the context window, or the matrix size, or something like that in the next year or so?
I think they can still do that. I think I guess currently the real physical limit is cooling. Because if you multiply two, like matrices are too big, then the GPUs become too hot, and then you cannot put too many of them together because of the difficulty in heat dissipation. That's the physical limit. The other limit is actually just the money. Making bigger wafers are a lot more expensive, and well, there are already people doing that. People take risks doing that. It's just very risky, very expensive. Even NVIDIA is not doing that yet, but they are acquiring the companies that have already taken the risk to do that, such as Grok. Recently, there is a company with the name Grok, not the XAI Grok, so it's Grok with the last letter Q, GROQ. $20 billion. They made huge wafers to just to copy the matrices faster. Yeah, very, very risky, but I think they succeeded. $20 billion is a lot. Yeah. Do we have more questions? Again, I'm very happy to stay. In fact, the longer you stay with me, the more grateful I am to the time that you spent. So thank you.
Right. So Jan LeCun give a quite controversy opinion, saying that LM will never reach AGI.
Chém tay ra.
Any comment?
Ôi đẹp chém gió là chín mạng nam mình.
Yes, only one comment. That comment of Jan LeCun only makes sense if you can define AGI, and I'm not going to get into the debate to define AGI because that would never lead anywhere. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. In fact, one of the interesting consequence, even for mathematicians, that we have to ask ourselves, what is intelligence? What is mathematical reasoning? What is being intelligent in this context, right? And we never really thought deeply about that. But this, I think, this existence of this module forced us to actually look more deeply into your soul, in a way.
Yeah,
the different thinking between, let's say, algebra and geometry and combinatorics, are there. We usually just think, oh, that guy is very good at certain thing, right? But we never really try to understand why, certain people are very good at certain things. But
yeah, I have that on that topic. I have some opinions, right? So I think I don't know what is intelligence or mathematical intelligence, but I know the reverse part of this game. That is, if AI can solve something, then chances are that people are going to say that thing is just pattern recognition. So this applies to chess. This applies to, I don't know, SAT critical readings. This has definitely applied to AP calculus, like doing some integration. It's all about memorizing patterns. But then I think more modern AIs like reasoning models, they show that this also applies to IMO. Maybe the IMO is also pattern recognition. Maybe that's fine. The mathematicians can accept that. But I don't think they can accept that Langland's program is also pattern recognition. In fact, I don't know if that is pattern recognition or not. But I guess my point is that the contrarian view is that maybe a big part of intelligence, bigger than what we are willing to admit, is actually pattern recognition. It's also evident in other types of intelligence that are not mathematics, right? There is art, music, and language and many other things. I don't remember. There are 7 of them, but many of them are already kind of admitted, accepted as a form of pattern recognition. Maybe, yeah.
I
Again,
think
it's kind of
I agree that a lot of so when you try to solve a math problem, even a famous one, and the solution is in the end just a combination of a small logical step, and if all the techniques are already exist in the literature, then it's I think you can get that by pattern recognition. And in fact, I think 99% of math research were performed like that. But I think the sort of mysterious part is like is when someone came up with totally a new theory that somehow like you play chess, but somehow you have embedded into a different game in 15 dimensions. That's what happened. That I think that would make people will convince people that that this is AGI, right? But I totally agree that solving a hard problem, even a conjecture, would be more like pattern recognition than and many of the work that we do every day, even professional mathematician, I agree that is quite simple pattern recognition.
I see. So I'm going to tell you about it. So on that topic, I think somebody has already asked the questions about novelty, like novel types of mathematics. So there's a group at Stanford. They did this experiment. So they look at a lot of training data, and then they they perform a classification on the training data to select the subset of training data which only include the text before the 17th century. So the idea is they want to train a model on only the text that appear before Galois was born. And they want to see whether the model can invent Galois theory if it's only trained on the things before Galois is born. So they did that, and then the result is that the model could actually produces Galois theory, like field extension and so on. However, and then they published a paper also. However, later on, some other investigators, they look at the paper and then they realize that the data filtering process is wrong, and there are actually some text about Galois theory in Farsi, written in Farsi, the Iranian language, that they fail to clear out from the training data, and the model it uses that knowledge to come up with Galois theory. Okay, so the result is wrong, and I don't. The paper was hard to do that experiment, but people have talked about doing that. Yeah.
Fascinating. Awesome. Wow. Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's a really wonderful talk, and I think we are very grateful for the opportunity to be able to look at these issues to hear about this issue from someone who actually doing it.
Again, I hope that this is of some interest to you. And I need to mention again, you see, it's very simple, and I think for a mathematical mind like yourself, this is what first year university linear algebra. It's nothing very deep, but
that's exactly why it's fascinating. But I think we learn how. I mean, I think it's a very it's amazing engineering achievement, to put this thing all together, and I think honestly, there's still, I mean, we kind of know like how evolution works, for example, right? But if you look at the amazing product of evolution, you still think, oh, maybe there's some magic in here. And so in a way, it feels to me like there might still be some magical things that because just from this, right, just from the, as you say, the simple process, one can produce this amazing result. It is it's very,
I see.
This is 30,000 feet above the ground, and Hugh gave an excellent summarize, but I know that there is huge engineering effort, extremely challenging theory stuff in compilers, all these kernel stuff, and not counting for when people move down to physics, then when chips are made, right? But anyway, thank you so much, Hugh, for this excellent talk. I myself and the audience learned a lot from this. let us thank you again for this excellent webinar.
All right. Likewise. Again, if I gave you something new that is helpful for you, I'm already very happy. So thank you for being here. Yeah, and as promised,
Alright,
I'm
thank you
going
so
to
much.
answer all of the questions in the Q&A docs by me, not by AI. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Alright, thank you so
Bye
much.
bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us
Bye bye.
today.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.